Good afternoon. Welcome to the Oklahoma City Water Utilities Trust meeting for March 2nd. The first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes for the meeting of February the 16th.
Move approval.
A motion and a second to approve the minutes. Is there discussion, conversation, additions, corrections? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved. The next item is the consent docket. Number of matters.
Move the consent docket subject to individual consideration.
Motion and a second to approve the consent docket subject to individual consideration. Are there items to be discussed separately?
Mr. Chairman, I think I'd like to take this opportunity to note that among your items, we're beginning in item 3A1, you're approving plans and specifications for phase 1 of some work we're going to do on the sewers that are in the general downtown area, the 42 and 54-inch interceptors that include a crossing of the river. We want to do that work to clean the sewers first and then with a TV camera make certain that they are in good shape before we proceed with a relief line. What cleaning will do is make certain that we understand exactly how much flow that pipe carries, and it will help us learn how we will clean those large diameter mains ourselves in the future.
Any other matters or any questions about this one concerning the consent docket? All those in favor of the consent docket say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent docket's approved. Next item is reports. Have a motion to receive the reports.
I'll move that we approve the reports.
Second, but I have a question.
Have a motion and a second to receive or approve the reports. Are there comments made about any of them?
It's a question, Chairman.
Okay.
Do you all get many complaints about the method we use to calculate this? I get a phone call occasionally about this.
No. Generally, certainly there are a few customers who are concerned with talking about item 4A, the winter period averaging process, where staff is proposing we use the months of December through March. And that's the month that you received your bill, December through March, for the winter period average. The Oklahoma City's ordinance allows a 6-month winter period from which 4 consecutive months are selected. I think that we receive most calls from people with rescue lawns, when we have a dry winter especially, and from commercial customers who are a little frustrated because commercial customers, unless they have a deduct meter, pay 100% of the sewage bill. They don't get winter period averaging. Winter period averaging applies only to residential customers. In terms of total numbers, we take maybe 10,000 calls at the call center about what winter period average is. Explain this to me. Mine went up, mine went down. Generally, those are handled with an explanation. There are a few appeals which the superintendent of utility customer services handles, not more than 50 a year typically. But council members do also receive calls about winter period averaging, 10 to 20, maybe a similar line. Some people are very frustrated with it. Again, tends to be folks who have lines that require water in the wintertime.
Do we offer an alternative to the people who complain about the method?
You may set a separate water meter for irrigation purposes. The payback for that is a long time, generally, unless you're doing a large amount. For example, a commercial site, hospital grounds come to mind, or other facilities that have a large park setting associated with their grounds. We'll typically set a separate irrigation meter for which there's no sewer charge.
And when will this new usage be on the customer's bills?
When's it actually on the bill? April?
We start applying it in the April forward. So we start the calculations about a part of March and start applying them.
So the next billing cycle after March
Yes.
would include that new number based on that. Thank you.
Any further comments or questions about the reports? I have a motion and a second to receive the reports. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Reports will be received. Next item is item 5. First item is 5A. Approve the park naming and park improvement donation agreement between Oklahoma City and the Oklahoma City Downtown Lions Club.
Move approval.
Second?
Motion and a second to approve item 5A. See, Mr. Wisenhut's here. I assume you're here for questions if we have any.
I'd like to tell you very briefly what's happening here, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
The Lions Club has gained well over $400,000 in donations from the groups you see listed and several others, allowing them to replace the playground that they placed originally in '95 at Lake Hefner. That's probably our most heavily used playground in town. It's really worn out. It'll be replaced with a universal playground, which will be our first of that style. It's a playground that encourages the use of all age groups and all physical abilities. There'll be a number of pieces on the playground that can be used by a disabled person, someone who might be wheelchair bound, for instance. So we're really looking forward to this, and you'll also notice on your memo that they've requested and council granted this morning naming the park after the club. So we heartily recommend this, and I think you'll enjoy seeing it go up. And yes, sir, I would answer questions if you have any.
When will we put any shade trees out there?
There's always trees that have to be planted when a construction project goes in to meet the landscape ordinance. So yes, sir.
So the replacement trees, though, will be young enough that they're not going to provide much shade.
I'm sorry, sir, I couldn't.
Would it be a safe statement to make that replacement trees will be small enough that they're not going to be able to provide much shade?
Yes, sir, but there are shade structures that are a part of this playground installation, tables with shade structures over them.
Okay.
Very good. Any further comments? Have a motion and a second on item 5A. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5A is approved. Next item is 5B. We have a gentleman who has signed up to speak on 5B. It's Mr. Edwards, who I believe is the person that is the applicant. If you'd come forward. For the record, you need to state your name and address.
My name is Mel Edwards, 12632 Chisholmsburg, Yukon. And I've already given a handout to each one of the voting members plus the legal counsel on the request for oversizing the water line. And I appreciate your time and hope for fair consideration on this. Thank you.
Is there concern on the part of the staff about approving the application?
Mr. Chairman, trustees, we reviewed this issue back in the year 2004. The concerns at that time raised by legal counsel, which myself still remain today, that the developer at the time of the installation did not file a written application for Policy A, that he did not complete the procedures in accordance with Policy A, which require competitive bidding of the project, that the project was already dedicated, transferred to, and accepted by the city before Mr. Edwards made his application. So it was something now that we already owned before the application was made, and that to be consistent with our other developers who have opted to not use our Policy A procedures for whatever reason to proceed on their own, would have not been permitted to come back and request Policy A consideration after the fact.
I would interpret that to mean you have some serious objections about this.
Yes, sir.
I might comment first of all, Mr. Edwards is not my kin. So I'm not conflicted, but it seems like it's not that much money, and it looked like that he's done some nice things with the area, and it doesn't seem quite fair that he doesn't have an opportunity. He didn't follow the rules exactly, but it looks like he's kind of done it within compliance with the Oklahoma City requirements and the Oklahoma City specifications, so I'm probably going to support him.
What's the downside ramifications to supporting his application?
From a legal perspective, I have concerns that we have already accepted the project before a request for reimbursement was made. So we have an asset for which there's no exchange of consideration. From a policy perspective, I have a concern that we would get additional other late applications for improvements that are already in place and have been accepted by the trust and the city, and requesting compensation at this time. Those are my concerns.
Have there been any material changes in circumstances since the trust previously considered this in 2004?
I'm not aware of any changes in the circumstances. Perhaps Mr. Edwards can point out any that he has observed.
I'm not aware of any changes to anything. Let me add a couple of things here, if I may. When I met in 2004, there was 4 voting members here that day. And this is one of the things that has really irritated me. And Guy Lieberman was the chairman that day. And they went to the vote, and the vote was 2-2. And he actually kind of sneered at me and tee-heed and said, ties lose. Well, 2-2 is not a win or a loss. I hope that would be given consideration. Maybe that's the way it is, but it's not a win or a loss when it's 2-2. And Mr. Edwards, I think I heard you mention previously when I talked to you that you was not aware of anyone else applying for oversizing, that was prior, before this new ruling went into effect. So, a rash of, of people applying for refund for oversizing is probably not going to happen.
Before we vote, I want to advise you that a 2-2 vote will cause you to lose. And so there are 4 of us here again today, and if the vote is 2-2...
Well, I know, and
I understand...
Mrs. Slaughter, the reason I wasn't here 2 weeks ago, she said there wasn't a full agenda there that week, and she said there would be a full agenda here today, but I see that there is not.
Hopefully I won't snicker at you.
I appreciate that, Mr. White.
But the rules have not changed since then, and if it is a tie vote under our rules, it would be you would lose. You have to have a majority to win.
A question, other than the timing issue, did this project timing in the competitive bids, did this project comply with all the city requirements? Because is the water line what the city would have required had they had the option?
Yes, the water line was built according to standards. We approved the plans for construction. It met other criteria. Under the 2 policies, and the line was built before we had both policy A and A1. The second policy, A1, gave the developer more flexibility with regard to installing the pipe themselves, but was not in place, again, when Mr. Edwards built the pipeline. I think that the issue raised is there wasn't a prior application in place. There was discussion about an application. I recall that. And then finally, yes, the line is in. It works. It is oversized, as Mr. Edwards states. It simply did not follow procedures and was really built more consistently with the policy A1, which went in place in 2003, than the original policy that was in place at the time.
At the time the pipeline was built, water line was built, what method of compensation or reimbursement was in existence? How did we compensate the developer for this?
Developers were paid back as new connections were made to the pipeline that they constructed. Only residential property was eligible to pay the fee for the new connection. So typically on border mains or mains in arterial streets, you saw more commercial development, and payback was slow for residential type construction.
So the developer, under that policy that was in effect at that time, essentially was taking risk that there would be adequate residential development along the pipeline to pay for his investment.
Yes, there were. Another factor though, in deciding to offer a new option was simply the administrative processes required to make certain developers got their payments for 15 years were burdensome and subject to errors. So from our standpoint, we, at the staff level, we still offer Policy A, but we strongly encourage Policy A1 so that we can...
And Policy A1, if I understand it right, provides for a cash reimbursement from the city for this.
Yes.
There's no tie to development along the line.
Yes.
So if this had been constructed under Policy A1, Mr. Edwards would have been entitled to the $11,000 he gets.
Yes.
And that is the policy that's essentially preferred right now, A1.
Yes, from an administrative standpoint.
Okay.
It's
And
quite simpler.
when was Policy A and Policy A1 adopted?
Policy A goes back to the late 70s.
Okay.
Policy A1, my recollection is not that good. It goes back to when Mr. Taft was still water director.
Okay. So those policies were in effect in September of '99?
A1, I do not believe is available.
No, A1, I think 2003.
Okay. So I guess I'm confused now as to what the policy was for reimbursement, if any, in 1999.
In 1999, the only policy available for water extension mains was Policy A. Policy A1 had not been created yet.
Okay.
Policy A provided for the developer to escrow money with the city, and the city would competitively bid the project.
Mm-hmm.
Policy A1 was subsequently created in 2003, such that the developer would put in the line at their own cost up to our standards, and it would sell us the main at a discounted price.
So what was the approval process on the part of the trust to approve the line or accept the line into service? Because it says it was transferred to the city in September of '99. I mean, I'm assuming that Mr. Edwards went out and constructed to some standard, and we were okay with that. There was not necessarily a requirement to be competitively bid, or was there an affirmative decision made on the part of the developer not to bid it, but just do it, the work himself?
It's my understanding that the developer decided that he would do the work himself.
Okay.
Many of the mains built around town are built by developers outside of Policy A or A1.
Okay.
Based upon what their individual demands and needs are.
Sure. But again, what I'm trying to get at is what would have the reasonable expectation have been for reimbursement in the fall of '99?
Only from
Residential.
Right.
So under the 99 plan was in effect in 1999. The only reimbursement due Mr. Edwards would be from the revenue associated with the residential customers for 15 years.
Yes.
Or however long it takes to develop it out. I mean, it could be 25 or 30 years.
Well, actually, we shortened that to 15 years for administrative reasons back in the mid-90s.
So if it's not redeveloped, if it's not developed into residential lots within 15 years, it dies?
Correct. We were not looking to have people speculate and be able to have to track lines indefinitely. In fact, we had a very long buyout process back in the late 80s, early 90s to try and get rid of some Policy A lines from the 70s that were still 20-plus years old and we're still paying out $5 checks here and there.
And the commercial piece is not getting reimbursed is?
That has always been the policy.
Have we computed how much would have been paid back had he been under that policy? Do we know how much money have we generated? I guess I'm asking, have we generated the revenue that would have paid him back had he done everything else properly?
The question, as I understand it, is if he had properly filed the paperwork in 99 under Policy A, what tap fees would he have accumulated up to this point?
Yeah.
I've not done that calculation. Mr. Samandi, did anyone do that calculation from your staff?
I understand from our conversations that's quite all right. I understand from our conversations with Mr. Edwards that the connections thus far are all commercial. We would have, again, another 5 years to go.
And so under A, at the time in '99, commercial connections are not eligible
That's
for reimbursement. Okay. And apartment units are not considered to be residential.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
I see why we changed the rules.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm going to move that we pay Mr. Edwards.
We have a second? I'll second it for the purpose of further discussion. I still haven't made up my mind yet, but I'll second it for the purpose of further discussion. Let's talk a little bit about the precedent, because this is $11,000. I agree with Trustee Edwards about $11,000 is hardly enough to, in this kind of a situation, to get too worked up about. What I'm really more concerned about is what the potential precedent might be, where there might be hundreds of thousands of dollars out there that might be claimed somehow. If this is, if we approve this, that somebody that's not eligible now under the current situation would be able to come back in and say they had a much more substantial claim than $11,000 and use this as precedent that we could, since we've done this, we ought to pay it. Do we have any feel for that?
Well, my concern is when Mr. Edwards started this project, the only method of compensation for his work was the revenue associated with with the residential water sales. And so he had no expectation when he did the project of being reimbursed $11,000.
May I add something here, please? Whenever I made the decision to do it under Policy A, obviously I had to, file for permits and do the surveying and everything associated with it. But, I did not know I had to do any paperwork to apply for Policy A. I was told that if I did it under Policy A, if I paid for the pipeline all myself, as stated in the document, this would be what would happen, that I would be reimbursed if anybody tied into it. And that was anybody. This was what I was told. But then, as the document states, the church tied into it, and they're exempt. The apartment complex tied into it, and then they're exempt. And then I found out, so I acted in good faith. If I'd known there was some paperwork had to be done under Policy A, I would have done it. But, when I made the decision to go ahead and pay the whole cost myself, I thought I was doing it under Policy A. I did not know the person had to go through some paperwork process to make it proper under Policy A.
Well, my understanding under Policy A is that you would be reimbursed by virtue of residential water sales. And there are no residential water sales.
See, I didn't know that churches and commercial property was exempt. I was under the impression that I would be reimbursed if anybody tied into it. So, it's...
The way Policy A is written, if you'd have done it under Policy A, he still wouldn't have got the money. Is that right? He wouldn't be eligible for the money
Right.
under Policy A.
Not yet.
Because
Not yet.
because of the lack of residential connections.
Yeah. But I was never told that. I'm just asking for fair consideration here on, where the shortcomings come up on this.
Would you have not done the work?
No, I would have probably went a different route with this, where we put out for bids, and then Oklahoma City would have shared some of the cost in this. Is that not right, Marcia? I understand that some of this cost could have been endured by, I'm assuming, Oklahoma City other than myself, if I had not chosen to do it under Policy A.
Under Policy A, we would have required you to competitively bid the project. That's something that you got to, how to say this professionally, you were able to take your own bids without going through an advertisement process we would have required. You would have actually only been paid back under Policy A a fee based on the number of connections from residential customers that were added. Under Policy A1, we get confused when we talk about them. That's why I'm struggling too. We don't talk about them together often. under policy A1, we would have directly reimbursed you a flat fee, which is the calculation that was used here, $3 in diameter foot.
Well, if Mr. Edwards chose not to participate in policy A, he could have built a 12-inch water line that would have satisfied his needs.
That's
The
correct.
city wanted a 16-inch line for further growth.
That's correct.
Had he not chosen to participate, how would the city have gotten the 16-inch line installed? Would we have paid the difference? Or we would have paid part of the cost? Or we would just turned him down, he couldn't build the 12-inch line?
We would have, go ahead.
Under policy A, he puts in a 12-inch. We tell him he has to put in a 16-inch. He gives us his share of an estimated amount for the 12-inch. We put Aqua money in to the escrow, bid the project. If the numbers still work out, or if the bids come in higher, he has to put in more money for his share of the 12 on the math, and then we award the project, and then he gets the line, we get the oversizing, and then if there are taps in residential, then he gets his proportionate share of those thereafter.
So at that time, 1999, the city made a decision whether it was going to be a policy A project or not.
The applications come to the trust as a policy A would be.
No. If Mr. Edwards had decided not to participate in policy A, what was his options been? Could the city have forced a policy A situation? I don't understand exactly the process, and that's what I'm trying to
Yes, we could have told him that we want a 16 put in there and expected it to be a policy A, and the difference also you get into is that when you go through the public competitive bidding process, many times the developers believe the price is much higher than if they do it on their own. So the money he saved by doing it himself, theoretically, overcame the other factors there also. So it's a trade-off either way.
Did Mr. Edwards ask to do it as a 12-inch line to begin with, and the city said it needs to be 16?
Yes, that's my understanding.
And the $11,000 is the difference between the 12 and the 16, is that correct?
Yes.
And he would have, and I guess you would have just built the 12 had
That's
the
correct.
city not said. And so then you were told that you would get your money back from the residential.
Whether it's 12 or 16.
Yeah, but you'd get the.
Well, I was told to get my money back by tying into it at the time.
Okay, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. I see water lines and fire hydrants, out in the middle of nowhere. There's no residential, no businesses or anything. And I'll give an example. There's been a fire hydrant at like Southwest 44th and Sarah Road for years. And, somebody had to pay for that, and I'm sure a farmer didn't pay for it to have a fire hydrant there, whatever. And, the location where I built this, is, a lot better location, than some of these remote points. And, if what would have happened if if there was a water line there and I tied into it, the existing water line. Do you follow me?
Marcia,
What would have been my cost if I tied into existing water line?
Marcia, have we had other requests from developers to be reimbursed under similar circumstances? Where the residential water contribution wasn't adequate to pay for their pipeline?
Not that I recall.
So it's not a common thing. Developers take that risk, and they just assume it's going to be, their overall benefit will be. So that would be.
But I think developers would build a 12-inch, and they wouldn't have built a 16-inch, except the city told them to build a 16-inch.
In anticipation of residential.
Yeah, and so I think that's where the real difference is in this situation than what if he would have only built the 12-inch. That's why I felt the way I did.
But other developers have made that same choice, and they've failed to recoup their investment from residential water sales, and they've not come to the city and asked to be reimbursed, according to what Marshall said.
I don't know that, but maybe that's right.
That's correct.
But since 2003, we've got much better rules.
Yes.
And guidelines, and so it would have to be somebody who built something back before
Would you got
2003.
some historical.
I think Mr. Edwards maybe just has more tenacity than most of the people that back out there that long.
I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask for a 2-week continuance because there are 4 people here and we run the risk of doing the same thing we did last time. I have not been able to figure out how these guys are all going to vote yet. So I'm going to give you the opportunity to ask for this to be continued 2 weeks where there'll be 5 of us here.
I'll accept that opportunity.
Wait just a minute, let me think about that.
Say again.
The next meeting will be when? Okay, I'll be here. I was going to say, I was thinking the 23rd, and I thought I'm not going to be here the 23rd. You're not going to be
It's
here.
spring break.
Okay.
I have a family obligation that week. I apologize.
A 1-month continuance.
Right, but
He's not going to be
we're
here.
out on the 16th, so.
A 1-month continuance for the first meeting in April.
That'd be fair. Thank you.
I mean, I don't know how, like I say, I'm not sure how the vote's going to turn out, but I don't want you to
April 6th, yeah.
think you got somehow snickered at over a 2-2 vote, because I'm
again,
afraid that might happen here
2 to
today.
2 is a tie.
I understand.
I hate the ties lose.
And in this game, it does not go to the runner.
That's right. That's right.
Appreciate it.
I'm just trying to be fair with you and
Okay.
and satisfy that concern you have. Why don't we, I would accept a motion to continue this until the first meeting in April.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to continue matter till the first meeting in April. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you then.
Mr. Chairman, staff will remember what it knows about policy A and policy A1 and give you a little
Well, some of
summary
these
about that.
questions that have come up about that, you might be able to give us a little bit.
We'll be happy to.
On all those. How about the next item's item 5C, resolution declaring an emergency concerning purchase of diffuser equipment.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve item 5C. Comments, questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5C is approved. 5D, authorize general manager to execute a consent order to pay the DEQ for killing fish.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve item 5D. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 5D is approved. Last item on the regular part of the agenda is executive session. We need executive session? We do. Have a motion?
So move.
Motion and a second to enter executive session.
Carl Edwards,
Here. Yes.
Cody Gray,
Aye.
Pat Ryan, and Chairman White.
Yes. We'll complete the rest of the agenda before we do that. Is there any new business? Are there comments from trustees, staff, or citizens? Hearing none, we're going to executive session and we'll be back.